It was announced this week that Whitehorse, Yukon would be the site for the first national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Joining CFWE is the co-commissioner of the National Inquiry, Miss Marilyn Poitras. Commissioner, from your perspective, how is the inquiry shaping up, and why was it decided that the Yukon would be the first destination?
The inquiry is shaping up. We've really taken our time to make sure that we've touched base with lots of people, that we've touched base with our elders and our teachers to make sure that we're doing this in a way that's respectful, inclusive, and honoring all kinds of legal traditions, Canadian, Indigenous, and international. We've selected a pretty great team, in my opinion. I think we've got some people that are dedicated to the issue, that really want to be part of this as a process and are here definitely working from their hearts. We have started the process of looking at the hearings. Of course, is typically what everybody focuses on with the commission. When are the hearings? This commission's doing things a lot differently than other commissions have, and that's how come so much work's gone into the front end. We want to be invited into communities. We want to ensure that when we get there, that the protocols and traditions and practices, from traditional Indigenous practices to religious practices of Christians, are recognized and respected by us when we get there. We're going out of our way to make sure people understand that when they come to the commission, we're not just looking for people who are on the lists of the Picton lists and the Highway of Tears lists and the RCMP lists, that the systemic nature of the work that we're looking at is much, much more inclusive than that. So that's just taken a long time to figure out how to get that word out. Who do we reach? How? All that kind of thing. And now, where do we start? The Yukon is the starting point, because you have to start somewhere. It'd be great to start in the north, and they were ready.
Commissioner, what will the settings be in the hearings in each province or territory?
Well, where we go to meet with people to collect the information they want to share with us, we're going to set it up in a way that's got some traditional artwork, that's got a physical setup that's inviting and secure feeling. As you know, we are to be trauma informed and make sure that this isn't some kind of institutional process that people have been used to, that's been damaging in the past. And so we're asking people to share with us probably the worst parts of their lives in terms of talking about their friends and family members. We want to make sure it's an environment that they're comfortable in. There's secure health supports in there, and where their participation will be meaningful for them.
Commissioner, can you give us an idea of maybe some of the challenges that you've been facing, or even maybe a highlight?
I will tell you that, I think we're facing challenges that every brand new anything faces. Where do we set up? How do we set up? We don't have an office space here. We're trying to create the relationship with the federal government that's in charge of making sure the budget's being followed to the last letter. And how do we reach across the country? That's been huge for us. How do we do this in a way that's a national commission, but we can bring people together and feel like a team, and we're doing this in a way that is a collective movement? How do we do it so that we're honoring Indigenous traditions as well as Canadian legal traditions? That's hugely challenging. That's been a challenge. The highlights are easy to list for you. We have met women and some men, some fathers and some uncles that have come out. But we have met the most amazing women who have lived through things that most people would never have to, in their worst nightmares, live through. And they are the people who have pushed this issue far enough and long enough, over decades. I'm not talking about signing up a couple of years ago. Over decades, that have pushed on this to make sure it becomes part of the Canadian narrative and that we don't ignore it. We've met mothers and aunts and sisters and grandmas that are still standing after losing family members and having them gone missing in the most graphic, awful ways, that want something better for their family. And their stories are amazing.
Commissioner Marilyn Poitras joining CFWE this afternoon. Commissioner, there's been a lot of criticism that the hearings are taking too long to get going, and some are being left in the dark. How would you respond to those complaints?
I would say that we're dealing largely with a group of people who have been waiting for a really long time. I mentioned we've got people who've been involved in this for decades, and they're anxious. They want to know what's going on. One of the things that happens when you're dealing with people who have lived through trauma is leaving them out of the most basic details is not something that sits well with them. Waiting for a diagnosis, waiting for information, waiting to hear what's happening is really hard on people. And so that's where that criticism is coming from. People want to know what's going on. We're only months into this. We're doing it in a way that's not been done before. We're starting from scratch to build a national office. It's the time frame when people look back. It's not going to be out of the ordinary. If you look at other commissions that have been created and started and stopped and had to go again, we're pretty much on track with that. So I just think it's people just really anxious to say, I want to have my day. I want to have my say. What are you people doing? And that's a reasonable pressure.
For those people listening throughout Alberta who have lost their daughters, sisters, friends, is there a way for them to reach out to the Commission to give their story?
That is just an excellent question, sir. We really are working hard to gather names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses. The thing that's going on for us is that we don't have that kind of detail. The pre-inquiries met with lots of people, but because of the privacy legislation across the country, you can't just hand out people's personal information. And so we're working really hard to get as many people engaged with us as possible. So if you go to our website, you can find our phone numbers and our web addresses, and we're starting to do a lot more work in community, and we're going to be working hard with community partners to get that out there so that people will have access to us to tell us whatever they want to tell us. And of course, if you've heard any of the information we've shared so far, you'll find that it can be through testimony, it can be through a statement, sort of similar to sort of doing an affidavit. You can just tell your story. Somebody will either audio record it or write it out. We're going to do some video. We're encouraging people that are artists to submit art to the Commission that's a statement on what they've been through, what their family's been through, what their life experience is around this issue. From strength to trauma, we want the whole story. So there's lots of ways to get engaged, and we're really looking for that engagement piece right now.
One of the commissioners of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Inquiry, Miss Marilyn Poitras, joining CFWE this afternoon. Commissioner, personally, what do you hope comes out of all this?
My hope is that this inquiry, first and foremost, shows the strength of Indigenous people in this country, that we've lived through a lot of trauma, and we're still standing, we're still here. We have leaders and mentors and people from the early legislative process that have said, this is wrong, you can't legislate us out of existence, you can't process us out of existence, you can't beat us out of existence. And I think that's a story that's going to come out of this, and where we participate and how. I want the Indigenous voice to come out of this, and I think it's starting.